Today I will be making an oil-free granola recipe using just a few pantry staples, and this recipe is very flexible depending on what you happen to have on hand or whatever your preferences are. So we will of course need oats. I've got 4 cups of rolled oats, and then you can use coconut oil, but I'm going to use applesauce today. You could also use canned pumpkin if you prefer. I have half a cup of maple syrup in addition to the half a cup of applesauce. And then we have half a cup of sliced almonds. You could use walnuts or pecans depending on your preference. And then I also have a half a cup of pepitas or pumpkin seeds. And then half a cup of raisins. You could also use golden raisins or craisins if you prefer, along with a teaspoon of vanilla and a teaspoon of cinnamon. So first I'm going to start by pouring in the 4 cups of oats into a large bowl. I'll also mention that you will need a large baking sheet, either lined with parchment paper or use a Silpat, and then you'll need a cooling rack to cool the granola, because you want it to cool completely before you put it into a jar so that it will stay crunchy. Now I will add the applesauce to the oats, along with the maple syrup. And I'm going to stir this together to incorporate the wet ingredients first before I add in the other things. I'll go ahead and add the vanilla now. And stir just to get everything well incorporated. I'll sprinkle on my cinnamon. Having the wet ingredients already in there will help the cinnamon to stick to the oats. And then I will add the sliced almonds and pumpkin seeds and stir again. Now I'm only going to do half of this at first, baking half of it so that there's enough room on the cookie sheet, and then if it's too crowded it won't get crunchy. Additionally, I'm going to save raisins for the second batch. So now I'll just pour it onto the cookie sheet. I'm pouring half onto a parchment lined baking sheet, and then I will spread it out so it can bake evenly. And I will preheat the oven to 350. And I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes to check on it, and we'll go for 18 to 20 minutes, but flipping halfway through so that it can get toasted all and the edges do not get burnt. Okay, so the oats have been baking for 10 minutes, and now halfway through I'm just going to stir so that everything can get evenly toasted without getting too burnt on the edges. And then I'll spread it back out. Okay, slide it back into the oven, and then we will set the timer for 8 minutes. And I'll come back and check on it, and if it's done I'll take it out. If not, I'll let it go for another 2 minutes, for a total of 20 minutes in the oven. And for the second batch, I'm going to go ahead and add in the raisins. Half a cup of raisins, stir to incorporate, and then we'll add this to a baking sheet as well. Okay, so it's been another 8 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the granola out of the oven, and it is looking nice and crispy around the edges but not burnt. I'm just going to slide this parchment paper right onto the cooling sheet. And I'm going to let the granola cool completely before I put it back into a jar. And then I'm going to put a fresh baking sheet, fresh parchment paper onto the baking sheet, and add in my second batch of granola, which is the other half of the recipe, this time including raisins. And then I will just spread this out over the parchment paper lined baking sheet and pop it in the oven for another 18 minutes. And I'll set the timer for the first 10 minutes, flipping halfway through. Once the granola has completely cooled, you can gather up the parchment paper and pour it into a jar or other airtight container.